The wind didn't just howl. It attacked. It slammed into Morgan Hale's face like a living thing, sharp and merciless, slicing through his coat as he stepped outside the ranch gate. Snow flew sideways, thick enough to erase the world beyond a few feet. Nights like this killed men who thought they were strong. That was when he saw her. At first, she looked like a shadow standing against the storm, unmoving, impossible. Then the lantern light caught her shape, and Morgan stopped breathing. She was enormous. A towering native woman stood beyond the fence, straight back despite the violence of the wind. Snow clung to her skin. Her coat hung in tatters, barely covering her broad shoulders. Blood-dark stains marked the fabric. Her bare feet were buried in ice, yet she didn't tremble. She looked carved from endurance itself. Morgan raised the lantern higher. Her face came into view, severe, proud, exhausted. Black hair whipped wildly around her head, tangled and frozen stiff. Her eyes locked onto his, not begging, not demanding, just waiting. When she spoke, her voice was rough, scraped raw by cold and distance. "I need shelter, just for tonight." She paused, swallowing. "I will work. I will serve. Whatever you ask." Morgan didn't answer right away. He had heard offers like that before, from men broken by debt, from women chased by hunger, but this wasn't desperation begging for mercy. This was someone who had already lost everything and was standing on nothing but will. He studied her eyes. That was what decided it. Not the storm, not the wounds, but the look of someone who had been hunted to the edge of the world and refused to lie down. "You won't last another hour out here," Morgan said finally. He unlocked the gate and pulled it open. "Come inside." She stepped forward, each movement heavy, deliberate, like every step was earned. When she crossed the threshold, the storm seemed to rage louder, as if angry it had failed to finish her. Inside, warmth rushed to meet them. Firelight flickered across the cabin walls. The small space, built for one man, suddenly felt different, charged, full. She stopped just inside the door, shoulders tense, eyes scanning like a cornered animal. The fire revealed what the storm had hidden. Deep bruises, long scars, old and new, crossing her arms and ribs like a cruel map of survival. Morgan set the lantern down. "Sit by the fire," he said gently. "You're freezing." She hesitated, then obeyed, lowering herself carefully to the floor near the hearth. Her hands stretched toward the flames, fingers shaking now that the danger had passed. Morgan poured soup into a bowl and offered it. She stared at it, then at him. "Aren't you afraid of me?" she asked quietly. Morgan shrugged. "Most men would be." She waited. "They see someone who walked too far in a storm," he finished. "That's all." Something in her expression shifted, just slightly. She ate slowly, each swallow costing effort. When she finished, he handed her a blanket, then another. "I'll leave in the morning," she said without looking up. "I won't bring trouble to your door." Morgan glanced at the window. Snow packed thick against the glass. "There is nowhere to go," he said. "Not today. Not tomorrow." She studied him, suspicion warring with exhaustion. "If I stay," she asked, "what do you want from me?" "Nothing." The word landed heavy. "Stay alive. That's enough." She searched his face for a trick, a demand hidden beneath kindness. Found none. Finally she lay down by the fire, curling inward, breathing slow and deep. Morgan returned to the table, carving wood, pretending not to watch the way her body relaxed inch by inch. Outside, the storm screamed. Inside, for the first time in a long while, Morgan Hale was not alone. And neither was she. Morning didn't bring sunlight, it brought more white. Morgan opened the door and stared at the wall of snow stacked nearly to his chest. The wind still raged, violent and unrelenting. Leaving the cabin wasn't dangerous, it was impossible. Behind him, the woman stirred. She rose slowly, stretching like someone used to waking on stone instead of wood. In the dim light, her strength was undeniable. Corded muscle beneath bruised skin, power held in restraint rather than display. "I suppose I am still here," she said. Morgan handed her a cup of hot water. "Looks that way." She nodded, accepting reality without complaint. They didn't waste the day. Together they cleared paths, reinforced the stable, split firewood. She worked harder than any man Morgan had known, lifting fallen timber alone, moving with brutal efficiency. He watched in silence, equal parts awe and respect. "Were you always this strong?" he asked finally. She shrugged. "Strength is not a gift, it is a requirement." That evening, they ate by the fire. The cabin felt warmer than before, not from the flames, but from shared presence. "I have not been with anyone in a long time," she said suddenly. "Months." Morgan set his bowl down. "I don't expect anything from you," he replied evenly. "You are not payment." Her gaze sharpened. "The last man did. I am not him." Silence stretched. Then her shoulders eased as if something heavy had been set down. That night she slept near the fire again, but the space between them no longer felt dangerous. Outside, the storm refused to end. Inside, something began. The storm did not end quickly. Days passed, and the blizzard tightened its grip on the mountain like it had decided the cabin was not finished yet. Snow stacked higher against the walls. The wind clawed at the roof every night. Inside, the fire burned constantly, and two people who had entered as strangers were slowly learning the shape of each other's silence. Morgan noticed the change before she spoke. Asha sat near the fireplace, but she was no longer watching the flames. Her body was still, too still. Her eyes were fixed on the far corner of the room, where the shadows stretched long and unmoving. She had been like this all evening, untouched food cooling beside her. Morgan added another log to the fire. Sparks jumped. The room filled with a low crackle. "The wounds on your shoulders," he said gently. "They didn't come from the mountain, did they?" Asha didn't answer. For a long moment, Morgan thought he had pushed too far. He stayed seated, giving her space, keeping his voice calm. Then she reached up and loosened the blanket from around her shoulders. What the firelight revealed made Morgan's jaw tighten. The scars were not the kind left by cold or stone. They were deliberate, long, uneven marks, bruises that had healed wrong, evidence of hands, ropes, and repeated violence, pain delivered with purpose. "My people did this," Asha said quietly. Morgan felt something heavy settle in his chest. "Your tribe?" She nodded once. "They wanted me given to an elder," she continued, voice steady but distant. "A man with power, land, warriors. I was meant to belong to him." "And you refused?" "Yes." She lowered her gaze, fingers curling into the blanket. "They said a woman who refuses brings shame. They beat me until I stopped asking them to stop." Morgan's hands clenched, but he said nothing. "They dragged me to the edge of the valley," she went on. "They told me I was no longer Apache, no longer blood. They said I would die before sunrise." Her voice didn't crack. That frightened him more than if it had. "So you walked," Morgan said. "I walked," she confirmed, "through snow, through night, through pain. I kept walking because stopping meant they were right." Morgan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "No one has the right to decide your worth." Asha finally turned to him. Her eyes were dark, tired and guarded, but not broken. "I tested you," she admitted. "That first night, the way I spoke, the way I offered myself, I needed to know if you would take what others tried to take." "And you didn't," she said. "Not once." Morgan nodded slowly. "Because I'm not them." The fire sighed, settling lower. Asha drew the blanket back over her shoulders. "I have never felt safe," she said. "Not as a woman, not as a daughter, not even as a warrior." She hesitated, then added, "Until now. That admission changed the air in the cabin. Morgan didn't touch her, didn't rush the moment. He simply said, "You are safe here." That night, Asha slept deeply. No nightmares, no sudden jolts awake. Morgan sat at the table long after the fire dimmed, listening to her breathing even out, steady and real. Outside, the storm howled as if angry at what it could not reach. Inside, something unspoken had settled between them. Not desire, not obligation, but trust. And trust, Morgan knew, was stronger than the fiercest winter. Winter did not leave all at once. It loosened its grip slowly, like a predator retreating step by step. The wind softened, the snow stopped screaming. At night, the cabin no longer shuddered under the storm's weight. One morning, Morgan stood at the doorway, staring out at the valley. The snow still lay thick, but it had begun to glisten differently. It was melting. Behind him, Asha stood quietly, arms crossed, her breath forming faint clouds in the cold air. "When the snow goes," she asked softly, "what happens then?" Morgan knew she wasn't talking about the weather. He took his time answering. "What do you want to happen?" Asha didn't respond immediately. Her fingers tightened against her sleeves. "I've never had a place to choose," she said. Morgan turned to face her fully. "You do now." That afternoon, Morgan prepared his horse. "I need to go into town," he said, "just for the day." Asha's jaw tightened, just slightly. "You'll come back." "I will." She watched him ride off until the sound of hooves disappeared into the trees. Morgan didn't waste time in town. He went straight to the legal office, placed his money on the counter, and spoke clearly. Papers were drawn, names written, protection granted. By sunset, he was riding home. Asha opened the door before he could knock. "You came back," she said. "I said I would." He handed her the papers. She read them slowly, lips moving over the words. When she finished, she looked up at him. "You gave me belonging." Morgan shook his head. "I gave you proof of what already exists." That night, Asha stepped into his room without hesitation. "I am staying," she said simply. He didn't stop her. Spring arrived quietly. Snow melted into streams, pine scented the air. One morning, Morgan led Asha into the forest behind the cabin. He stopped beneath a tall pine and faced her. "You made this place a home," he said, "and I don't want to face another season without you." Asha studied him carefully. "Is this duty?" "No," Morgan said. "It's choice." She placed her hand over his heart. "Then I choose you." They were married that same afternoon. No crowd, no ceremony, just vows spoken honestly beneath open sky. Summer followed. One evening, Asha placed Morgan's hand on her belly. "There will be another heartbeat here," she said. Morgan couldn't speak. He just held her. Because some stories are not about survival. They are about finding a place where survival turns into life.